Welcome to the Scariest Things podcast, your gateway to the tropes and trends of the horror genre. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is episode number 53, where we are going to be talking a little bit about the latter half of the 1960s and those films that you need to go see, because I will tell you, out of all of the assignments, not assignments, that sounds like work. Out of all of the viewing that we have done in the last year, I think this was maybe the hardest because there is so much stuff. And really, you know, the early part of the 1960s, there's a lot of stuff. In the latter part of the 1960s, there is a lot of stuff. And the really difficult part is sorting through the horror and then horror adjacent and then horror sci-fi, because the universe got really big in the latter part of the 1960s.
Right. I think you started to see a big divergence in the types of horror movies that we were getting. They grew up in the 60s. I mean,
did they ever?
Because if the 1950s was atomic rubber monster stomping all over thing that was fun for teenage kids to go sneak out to the matinee, that changed, and we talked about that in our last episode about the 60s.
The 1950s were all about subversive behavior, and the 1960s was like that subversive behavior came to the surface.
Yes,
and it's like we're not going to sort of tacitly kind of inform you of the subversive behavior. We're going to show you the subversive behavior. And you see that in so many different films. But really, I mean, the 1960s really started with two things. It started with Peeping Tom, it started with Psycho. And those two films, frankly, broke the mold.
I think Black Sunday, but it wasn't seen in the U.S. though.
No, but it was really Peeping Tom. It was really Psycho. Those two films, I mean, those absolutely exploded onto the scene. And in fact, with the interesting thing about Psycho is that the studio Paramount had so little faith. They wanted nothing to do with Psycho when Alfred Hitchcock came to them, even though he was a very well received director at the time.
He was an Oscar-winning director.
He was an Oscar-winning director. When they saw some of the dailies, when he was explaining to them what it was, they were like, hell no.
Squeamish.
We don't want to be a part of this. And in fact, what he did was he said, okay, fine, I'll finance it. You guys don't even have to put any skin in the game, but I want 60% of the take off the film. And they said, whatever.
Nobody's going to see
this. And of course, we now know that Alfred Hitchcock laughed all the way to the bank. But yeah, so it was really I think it was really those two films that sort of set forth in motion. And then you had all these other sort of adjunct things happening at the time, like, you had the beginning of Giallo, you had the beginning of gore, you had sort of like
the Gothic,
the
historical
Gothic,
stuff,
amicus and horror, and you had all these things kind of colliding together, and they really they turned up the volume in the latter part of the 1960s.
Yeah, and I think it pushed the censors to the brink.
Oh my God, did it ever? Yeah, because it was prior to the MPAA. That didn't exist. Right. And there was a number of different cases that all the ratings boards, both in the UK, in Europe, and in America, were left dealing with, like Eyes Without a Face. The people, they were just like, okay, it's a sadistic doctor kidnapping a girl, torturing animals, cutting people's faces off. What do we do with this? Right. We don't even know where to put this.
Right. And I think that the fact that it was made in France made it exempt from Hollywood standards, and there was the push that you could see coming down the road from all of the European influence stuff. And right. I think
and in fact, Black Sunday, which you mentioned at the top as being one of the sort of lead progenitors of the decade. That film was just straight up banned in the UK.
Yeah.
It was banned, just outright banned. You could not see Black Sunday in the UK.
And and
it wasn't like we're going to give it an NC-17 or we're going to give it an X. We're not even going to let you see it.
Yeah, it can't. But that didn't stop them. And ironically, Barbara Steele was a Brit.
Right.
So,
right.
This was. I found that trying to sort through a lot of the '60s films, there's a lot of repetition of stuff. And I think trying to find
in particular sort of the Victorian historical kinds of stuff. I mean, Hammer AIP was kind of a little bit Johnny One Note.
Yeah.
I think what the things that changed throughout the course of the 1960s for those production companies was the injection of a lot of color, the injection of a lot of nudity, and the injection of real life sets. So they got out of the studios.
Right.
They started to get out of the studios, or at least in the case of like Witchfinder General. Most of that film was shot on the English countryside. It was not shot in a studio.
Right.
So those are the three big things that sort of came about, and they really like turned up the volume on all three things: colors, sets, and boobs.
All good things, right? So, Mike, you want to lead us off with the fearsome foursome, talking about so the movies we're going to talk about this time is 1965 to 1969 primarily.
Correct. And I'm going to start with speaking of Hammer, of the English countryside. Although this took place in Transylvania, I'm talking about the 1966 film Dracula: Prince of Darkness, featuring Christopher Lee.
Yeah,
this was the second time he played Bram Stoker's beloved vampire. Terrence Fisher, of course, who was like a stalwart in the Hammer films universe. He directed this film. This is a really, really great film, even though, interestingly, Christopher Lee in this film is largely silent, has very little.
When I heard about Christopher Lee, Christopher Lee was a sensitive actor. I mean, right. He was, but he didn't feel like the dialogue was up to his expectations, right. And so he just hissed and moaned for his roles. He didn't really say much,
right?
I think the horror of Dracula, which he did in 1958,
right?
He was in it for like 15 minutes of the film, where largely it was Peter Cushing driving the story and chasing Minnie Harker and all these it was the classic Dracula tale. That was the horror of Dracula. So what made this one sort of different relative to the storyline, or was it just a different way of telling it?
Well, it was definitely a different way of telling it, and they didn't really follow the Dracula. They didn't follow the Dracula story, the Bram Stoker story, as much as they did. It was kind of like a precautionary tale, or a cautionary tale, rather, or I guess a precautionary tale. It's basically a group of four ne'er-do-wells who are traveling they're on holiday, traveling throughout the assumedly the Transylvania countryside, and they are warned repeatedly not to go to the castle, and lo and behold, they get in a carriage and are drugged to the castle.
So does he have an assistant, a Renfield?
He does indeed. But the thing, getting back to your question, the thing that makes this so great is the cinematographer, a guy named Michael Redd, has just an amazing eye for colors. And I was kind of talking about. I mean, they really turned up the saturation. Yep. In the latter part of the 1960s, partially because you could make color films and it wasn't costing you significantly more than it was to making black and white films. And he used a lot of, kind of in the way that, now on a contemporary note, like Panos Cosmatos uses a lot of really interesting color schemes. This guy used a lot of reds and a lot of blues, oftentimes alone, oftentimes together. But done in a really, really interesting way that just gave the film a great look.
Yeah, well, that was, and as you're mentioning, it's a Hammer staple at that point. I saw a couple of Hammer films in my homework for this. I saw The Gorgon, and I saw, as you came in, The Terror, with a very young Jack Nicholson. Well, that's not Hammer. That's AIP.
That's AIP. Yeah.
But because I think that
American
Roger
International
Corman
Pictures.
American International. But with Boris Karloff and Jack Nicholson.
Yep.
And they also super saturated their pictures. All of the Edgar Allen Poe stuff. You would think that would be largely black and white.
Right.
Pit and the Pendulum, which we talked about in the last one.
Yep.
Super saturated. I think they celebrated it sort of in a way that 3D in the aughts kind of became the rage after Avatar. All of a sudden, everybody started, hey, I'm going to do some 3D kind of stuff, and so they sort of went overkill with it.
Yep.
Granted, now it's sort of it gave it a little bit of a stage play kind of a look, even if they were using more real sets.
Right.
Kind of hyper realized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say if you've got a choice between a VHS, a DVD, and a Blu-ray, I would highly recommend the Blu-ray. One of the other things that I really liked was that one of the actors, Shelley, she because they filmed Dracula back to back with Rasputin the Mad Monk, and so they used a lot of the same. They used like a lot of the same sets. They used a lot of the same cast, and it was done a little bit haphazardly. And Shelley was talking about how she remembered swallowing one of the fangs, one of her Dracula fangs, and she had to drink salt water to bring it back up because of the tight shooting schedule. And because they didn't have a spare set of fangs, so she literally had to barf up her fang. The other thing, the other thing I thought was really great. The other thing I thought was really great about Dracula, Prince of Darkness is that it was paired as a double feature with the Plague of Zombies. So when you came into the film, you got plastic vampire fangs and cardboard googly zombie eyeglasses that were distributed to everyone in the audience when you came into the film. And I thought, man, what?
That's a promotion.
That is promotion genius.
Oh,
wow.
I
have no idea. Hollywood, where are you at? That's how you need to start to promote this stuff.
More Tingler.
More Tingler. We need more Tingler. The only film that's gotten close to the Tingler or Dracula, Prince of Darkness in the last several years is Slice. I mean Slice, but that was almost.
Did they deliver pizzas?
Well, they did a lot of interesting graphic design around pizza boxes.
Those were great. Like
pizza
the Pizza
boxes
Hut
and rip off of corporate pizza logos.
Yeah, the Domino's logos. That was somebody had a lot of fun in the art department on that.
Yes, they did. All right. Number 4 on your fearsome foursome list is.
This was okay. I had a lot of fun with this.
Yes.
This is a 1967 movie featuring the Joan Crawford.
Woo!
It's like Joan Crawford in a horror movie? Sign me up. This is Berserk.
Yeah.
Which is essentially Murder at the Circus.
But this is black and white, though.
No. No. Full color.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it is... in truth, it's kind of like watching the Batman 66 show.
Right.
The acting is about at that level. Michael Guff, interestingly, is the circus manager, and he goes on to play Alfred in the Batman movies featuring Michael Keaton.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's like, where do I know that guy? It's, oh, yeah, it's Alfred. But Joan Crawford is... We talked about Vincent Price chewing up the scenery.
Right.
Nobody chews up the scenes like Joan Crawford.
Rest in peace, Miss Crawford.
And she is, I think they allowed her to be like a 60-year-old sexy ringleader and of a circus that's getting plagued with things that are just horrible accidents. Right,
a boozy, smoky ringleader.
Yeah, it's very, and with like too much makeup.
Yes.
And probably not. She was wearing like nylon fishnetty kind of things as the ringleader. It's like, you go there, Joan. That's all right. I think that's fine. And
you do you. Girl.
Yeah, and she gets.
Do you.
I think there was somewhere in the contract where she gets to be the leading lady, and so one of the opening scene is Gaspar the Great is a tightrope walker, and they show him doing the tightrope walk, and the tightrope snaps and it wraps around his neck and he's hung, and it's like, oh no, and they go, this is going to be great though, because nothing sells like death, so we're going to get big audiences, and
again get on the hype machine.
Yeah, it is totally sort of the P.T. Barnum kind of a sucker born every minute kind of a thing. But there's this hunky man meat kind of guy who comes out to be this is Ty Gordon is the new tightrope walker, and his routine is walking blindfolded across a tightrope with a bunch of bayonet blades sticking up from the ground, no net, right? So what could possibly go wrong?
Right.
And I think one of the fun things is that the filmmakers allow Joan Crawford to be the sex symbol, despite the fact that she's well past normal.
Yes.
Normally they reserve that for actresses in their 20s and 30s, but she gets to get the.
When did Joan Crawford die?
I don't know.
Do you remember?
We need Ernie here.
Yes, I know. Where's our ace researcher? Come on.
But the movie that it features multiple fun kills. There's like they saw the lady in half, and they actually saw the lady in half by mistake.
Right.
Like
Herschel Gordon Lewis.
Yeah, and it's and then there's like there's a tent spike through a head. But the great thing about the circus thing is
it shown or is it implied?
No, the spike goes right through the back of the guy's head, punches out to the front.
Ooh, you're kidding.
And this is 1967. So again, no MPAA yet.
Right.
By this point, I think that they figured that the barn doors are open.
It's right around the corner.
Right. This would have gotten an R. For that. So that they also had a menagerie of some circus freaks. Kind of like Freaks.
A la Freaks, yeah.
The acting was about as good from those people. But it was part of the fun was that you're watching this movie and you're seeing these amazing circus stunts, real circus stunts.
Right.
With the possibility that someone's going to die. Right? And my favorite one was that they were saying, okay, we're going to line up, all these girls are going to lay down and we're going to have our elephants do a walk over the girls, and you're going,
oh my God.
Oh no, they're gonna squish these poor women.
How was the film received at the time? Did your research yield anything on that?
It was made for a budget of $3 million, and I think it made 70.
Oh, well,
it made
that's solid.
A lot of money.
Wow, and even back then, the film cost $3 million to make.
I think half of that went to Joan Crawford, but I think that they actually the name of the
somebody's probably still living off of that.
Yeah, but the thing is it's been completely forgotten. I bet you if you asked 100 people, they would never have known of a movie called Berserk,
right? About
horror at the circus.
Okay.
And the actual circus performers are from the Billy Smart Circus.
Okay.
They called it something else, like the River City Circus or something like that.
Right. This is the low rent Ringling Brothers.
Yeah. Well, and the fact is, they actually were doing it contemporaneous with the actual era. So this was 1960s traveling circus. It wasn't like the 1880s or the 1920s or something like that.
Where you still really had traveling circuses.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they were fearing that their brand was disappearing and they needed that they're running out of money, and how do we get more money? And all of a sudden, a couple of deaths into it, they're just like, we're making a lot of money. So it's campy. The acting is borderline terrible.
Right.
But it is a lot of fun. And for all the reasons I explained, it's actually getting to watch the circus with a chance of seeing someone die. So, and there's the circus performers and the roustabouts all go, we think it's got to be the boss. The boss is doing this, and that's the big thing is the who done it, and there's they assign a couple of cops to go try and figure it out. But you kind of have to watch to the end to see how it all plays out, because it's part murder mystery and part gore sensation stuff.
Right.
Joan Crawford.
Speaking of movies no one's ever seen or heard of,
okay,
I found a movie that I know you haven't seen or heard of. Both.
And because it cost $200 to get a deposit at Movie Madness?
No, because I was like, what? This is the 1968 Ingmar Bergman film.
Oh.
Hour of the Wolf. Have you ever heard of this film? Have you ever seen this film?
No. I will.
Doubleheader.
I'm going to come back at it because all of a sudden I thought we were going to have a collision here, and then all of a sudden I listened a little bit more closely. I will explain it.
All right,
in a little bit.
This was an Ingmar Bergman film featuring Max von Sydow.
I take that back. Yes, I did stumble across this on when I wikied horror movies from 1968, and I saw an Ingmar Bergman showed up, but I haven't seen it.
So this is an incredibly disturbing film about an artist and the loss of his sanity, and the sort of the kind of like the torment that you go through as you are losing your mind. And the thing that's interesting about it is that it's like Bergman. It's rather surreal because it involves the loss of your mind. But Bergman implies that there might be a little vampirism, maybe a little lycanthropy,
right,
and maybe just some plain old insanity, kind of all bundled together in one. And in fact, the quote that the title of the film comes from, there's a great quote in the film where Max von Sydow is explaining to his pregnant wife, Alma, played by Liv Ullmann.
Of course.
Yes. He says, the hour of the wolf is the hour between night and dawn, which happens to be when the hour when most people die, when sleep is the deepest, when the nightmares are more real. It's the hour when the sleepless are haunted by their deepest fears and when the ghosts and demons are most powerful. And the hour of the wolf is also the hour where most children are born.
I think that was from Henry Gibson, wasn't it?
I don't know. But yeah, it basically involves Max von Sydow and his wife. He plays an artist. They move to this remote island, and he slowly starts to lose his mind. The wife, shortly thereafter, upon arrival at the island, is visited by this woman who mistakenly says she is 215 years old. And she tells the wife, Max von Sydow's wife, to go read his diary that is hidden under the bed and to look at the drawings that he has been doing and to not trust him and do not believe anything that comes out of his mouth.
Wow.
And she does, and is absolutely horrified by what she finds. I won't say what it is she finds, but the film is a absolute trip. I mean, the only way to explain it is a trip. Like if it was done today, I mean, again, to give a nod to Panos Cosmatos, as we've been talking about a lot about lately, this is the kind of film he would do. It is really, really amazing. I mean, a lot of the dialogue, you know, the only version I could find online was
Is it in Swedish?
It's in Swedish, and it's subtitled English, and there's no dubbed version. And the thing that's really additionally complex about the film is that the dialogue doesn't really make sense, and just because it's sort of like listening to an insane person. It's like an insane person having to filter through what people are saying to him, and it's the end result of that insanity filter.
Okay.
Yeah, it is something else.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you managed to bring up Ingmar Bergman because we've talked.
And this is the only horror film Ingmar Bergman did.
Seventh Seal is kind of grim, but it's not
grim. It's not horror.
It's not horror.
Right.
You know, because Fellini didn't do horror,
Nope,
and
didn't touch
Truffaut didn't do it. I think you could say Godard did some that sort of it pushed the envelope on good taste and violence,
sort of crime horror, yeah,
right. But it wasn't really horror.
It wasn't horror,
but
yeah.
they were hugely influential on all of the horror directors of the time because I think that there's a couple of movies that I'm going to be talking about that clearly were being influenced by their European peers about like how you use a close up, how do you do cuts, how do you do your editing, in ways that I think shock and unnerve you, and I think that is something that the French New Wave brought to the table in a big way, and I think that sort of the Bergman school of movie austerity also starts showing up in the 70s. I don't think you feel its full impact until later.
Oh yeah, this film is incredibly austere. In fact, there's no yelling, there's no screaming. There's no blood, there's no gore, there's no monsters, there's no slashers, but you are still very, very haunted by this film. Awesome. All right,
and
what do you got?
What was that?
Hour of the Wolf.
Okay,
1968.
Okay, so remember when I said
Number
that
three.
I thought we were going to collide?
Yes,
it's because I have I was thinking I was when you said Ingmar Bergman, I thought for some reason
I did not
'Cause
say.
I've-
I didn't
I've-
say Lenny Bergman.
No. And all of a sudden I'm looking at this now, and it doesn't make any sense why I would have that I connected it. But this is an Audrey Hepburn movie.
Oh, okay.
And so I was thinking maybe it's the cadence of it, and I was like,
Hollywood royalty.
yeah, this is Hollywood royalty, and this
film,
is
filmmaking royalty.
1967's Wait Until Dark.
Oh yeah, that's a great. That's
This
a great
is
film.
and this goes squarely into the horror or not bag.
Sure,
but it's a thriller.
It's definitely a thriller.
It is.
Oh, for sure.
After seeing it, it is one of the best thrillers I've ever seen.
Yeah. That's a great film.
It's a stage play kind of a thing. Actually, originally it was a stage play, and then a lot of the critics afterwards, who at the time would say the movie's better than the stage play.
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with, I think because Audrey Hepburn, this is Liza Doolittle, right? This is Holly Golightly. She was
Right.
always this slight, doe-eyed, wafy, pretty young thing. And she really had, and although she got an Oscar for Roman Holiday,
yeah.
people didn't really take her seriously as an actress. They thought she was a star. She was a movie star. Mm-hmm. In sort of the same way that it's like, do we consider, how long does it take before, say,
Emily Blunt.
well, no, I think Emily Blunt's still young enough, but the Gravity. And shoot.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
I do.
Yeah, where all of a sudden later in your 30s you'd become a serious actress and you want to expand your chops. Sandra Bullock.
Oh, Sandra Bullock. Yes.
Yeah, who is
Bird Box.
Yeah, and now she's doing
Bird Box would have been a better guess.
Yeah, I was struggling trying to make that connection. But anyways, so Wait Until Dark is a Audrey Hepburn plays a blind woman who is set upon by 3 burglars who are trying to find. Apparently, her husband came into possession of a doll that had been stuffed with bags of heroin.
Right.
And they believe that they managed to trace that doll to their apartment in New York. And they initially start out playing grifters, where they're trying to coax the doll away from her. And they do a fairly successful job of initially tricking her into falling into trust with what she's doing. But then when she doesn't have the doll, or she doesn't know where the doll is. The doll, it is the great MacGuffin.
Right.
But they begin to switch tactics when they figure that there's something, that they start getting more aggressive. But she is very, very clever.
Yeah.
And she is able to intuit things because of her recent blindness. She's only been blind for about a year.
Right.
Since she had a car accident. And so she's still getting used to her own sensory perception. But she can start, like, things that someone will try and trick her by dressing up as somebody else. It's like one of the bad guys switches disguises, but it doesn't do a whole lot of good for her because she's blind.
Right.
And so she picks up little idiosyncrasies, and they start trying. They don't think that she can see what they're doing, but she can sense what's going on. And I think she's 3 steps ahead. And Alan Arkin, who plays the chief baddie, is equally clever. And so this match of wits,
Which is kind of funny to think of Alan Arkin as a baddie.
Yeah, and he plays this drugged up lunatic who's managed to entrap these other 2
Not quite as
criminals.
drugged up as Last House on the Left. But still drugged up.
No, but you clearly he's got some junky tendencies. I think that you question whether this thing's how much of a horror movie it is. It has one of the all-time great jump scares of the era at about the 3/4 mark.
Right.
And if you watch the trailer information, they start talking about how everybody in the audience at that moment would just scream.
Right.
Because it's like, you weren't expecting the jump scare, and it was spectacular. I kind of went, ooh. And so, yeah, you got me. So, it earned Audrey the 5th and the last of her Oscar nominations. And so, that's, I think heady stuff, and I think that it's kind of cool. So I've picked a couple of.
We will put those two in our horror, not horror the next time we do horror, not horror.
Yeah,
and we will debate the merits of that.
Yeah, I think because this is horror adjacent.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, if you look it up, and technically IMDb says mystery, thriller, horror.
Right.
And it's like, all right, I'll give it a shot because I was and it was great.
All right. Speaking of horror adjacent, this is the 1968 film, The Green Slime.
Oh man, I was so close to doing Green Slime.
Directed by Kinji Fukasaku.
Yeah.
It is it's a great film, and all I could think about the whole time I was watching it was Ridley Scott and Dan O'Bannon are the biggest ripoff artists this side of Quentin Tarantino. I mean, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked at the parallels to Alien. Yeah. I mean, it is basically the Alien story done 11 years before.
Right.
I mean, it is essentially the Alien story. I mean, to a T, a private corporation that's kind of a quasi-government entity asks a group of people to go to this asteroid
to check out the mysterious signal. Yep.
And to check out, and they drag in this case it's not a mysterious signal as much as it is the asteroid is going to be colliding with Earth, and they're supposed to be putting a detonation device on the asteroid to blow up the asteroid and clear its path from colliding with the Earth. But of course, they bring back with them the green slime.
Right.
The doctor wants, the
scientist trying to protect the monster.
The scientist trying to protect the monster. Bringing the green slime back onto the mothership. Some people want to study the monster. Some people want to kill him. The monster secretes an acid-like substance that burns the crew and the ship. The green slime has the ability to heal and resurrect and procreate itself.
And it's a wacky-looking monster.
The crew is able to it's able to jettison the green slime, but in the final fight, that has to take place outside of the ship. I mean, it's just like
the last sequence kind of reminds me of Moonraker.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Only one crew member remains and has to take the fight to the green slime. I mean, the number of parallels to Alien is kind of shocking. I mean, to the point where if Kinji Fukasaku was still alive, I would say
he would have sued him.
I would say, man, you need to go find a lawyer and sue Ridley Scott and Dan O'Bannon, because it is like such a ripoff. It's incredible to think that's. I mean, I have no idea whether, and I'm obviously being somewhat facetious, but it is incredible to think that there's that many. There is an amazing number of parallels. The other thing that's great about the film is that, again, as we were talking about with Dracula. The Hammer film is that, like, the color palette is like so bright and so vibrant,
to the point of being garish.
And everybody is dressed up in these just wildly colorful costumes.
So this would have been post Mercury Redstone.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they would have had a working knowledge of what a real spacesuit looks like.
Kind of, yeah.
Although
they kind of fudge it a little bit, but
again, like Moonraker.
Yeah.
Who it's like, okay, Moonraker, you had a good 15, 20 years of knowledge to actually do a decent looking spacesuit, and you kind of failed on that equation. Right.
The one thing where it does deviate from Alien is that, whereas in Alien there was how many crew members? There was seven crew members. In this case, there's like hundreds. Like, I have no idea how they got that many extras. I mean, there are so many extras on the spaceship and battling the green slime. It's kind of a head scratcher how they pulled in that many extras to play an active part in the film. It's kind of shocking.
There's an old board game that I used to play. That I think TSR, who also gave us Dungeons and Dragons, they had this board game called Those Awful Green Things from Outer Space.
Oh, right.
And you would suit up a whole crew to battle these monsters. That there's these one-eyed, chunky little monsters that would run around and try and they'd try and take over the ship. Mm-hmm. And they said, you might think this was an Alien ripoff. No, this is a Green Slime ripoff.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it would, so you'd have this big crew battling off these monsters that were running rampant through their ship, and it has been a very long time since I've seen the Green Slime. But
I totally recommend folks go out and watch it. I mean, it is like campy times 10.
Yep.
But it is so fun, and in fact, one of my favorite things is the opening song and closing song is just this like total non sequitur. It sounds like, Grand Funk Railroad. It's like this kind of heavy acid rock tune that they throw in at the front of the movie, at the end of the movie, that it just makes no sense as to why it's there. But it is an awesome song, and the song is not some sort of oblique reference to the Green Slime. Oh no. The song repeatedly uses
Green Slime in the
lyrics. So go see the Green Slime.
I had a similar kind of a thought when I was listening or watching Berserk. Because it has some like this oddball funk riff that's cutting through it that just seems totally anathema to being a circus tale. Right. You think it's like there's no organ grinder here unless you call it like the Doors kind of thing.
Right.
But it was an anachronistic tale put into the 1960s, and so that was like, all right, that was fun.
Yeah. All right.
My number 2. Now I'm actually dipping back. I'm dipping back to 1963 a little bit because I realized I did Planet of the Vampires last week, and that was a 1965 movie, so I'm going to switch positions. So did you know that Francis Ford Coppola's first feature film was a horror movie?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and so and do you know what movie I'm talking about?
I sure do.
Dementia 13.
Yes, Dementia 13, that's right.
And this is...
that's where it all started.
Axe murderer.
Yeah.
I think he started off sort of in the Roger Corman school. Coppola, he had some like production credits, but this was his first outing actually as director, Francis Ford Coppola.
Right.
And it's a story about a woman who is trying to, or at least initially the story is about a woman trying to hone in on an inheritance of an Irish castle. And in the opening sequence, her husband, John, has a heart attack as he's going, "Without me, you're nothing. You'll never inherit." And he dies. And so she tries to hide the fact that he died.
Right.
And there's a treacherous story in the family background of the young daughter dying. And so that the mother of the estate, who is the one who controls all the family fortunes, is superstitious. And so this woman, Lori, I think is her name, who is Louise, was planting seeds to try and trick the mother into thinking that her daughter was trying to come back from and give her secrets. And then in a very much like psycho sequence, we lose our primary protagonist about halfway through the movie. Spoiler alert.
That can't be. I mean, that's got to be a direct homage to.
I think
Psycho.
it has to be, because it's like you figure that this is the person we're supposed to be. Nope. And then, but the question is, who is that wielding the axe?
Right.
Because and then they off a couple of other secondary characters. And you're trying. It becomes a bit of a mystery, but it is straight up axe murderer madness.
I'm pretty sure Dementia 13 has fallen out of copyright protection as well.
Yes,
and so you can pretty much get it
YouTube
anywhere. Yeah,
that's
you know where I watched. That's where I watched Shower of the Wolf was on YouTube. I don't know if it's probably not fallen out of copyright, but you're probably hard pressed to find a copy of it.
No, Dementia 13 is available for free on YouTube.
Yeah,
It's. Granted,
did you see any inkling that Francis Ford Coppola would become what he became? Did you see any of The Conversation or Apocalypse Now or The Godfather Part 2?
I think he's learning.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good movie, not a great movie, but I think it's important because it is Coppola's first movie.
Right.
And I think it is also showing sort of the influence that Psycho has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's too bad he never really went back to horror. Mm-mm. I mean, he went back to the horror.
Yeah.
But
no. And one of our voters actually thought that Apocalypse Now was a horror movie.
That's right.
Scott.
Yeah. Yeah, it's too bad that he didn't ever go back to horror.
Yeah. So I think check it out. It's free.
It's not too late, Francis. I think he's only 78? 79, 80?
I don't think he's particularly. He's a producer now, not a director.
Here's your chance.
It's
Here's
good.
Your chance.
It's a fairly straightforward murder mystery kind of. It's
right.
Roped into there are definitely. But this one's straight up horror. I don't think you're going to debate this one horror thriller. This is they pitch it as a horror movie. The posters show essentially Louise with her. With him being dragged out of the pond by her hair with an axe. It's like, okay, so this is horror. We know where this is going. This is
the precursor to Last House on the Left.
Yes, but with similarly a mischievous woman getting her comeuppance.
Right.
So that's my number 2.
All right, my number 1. This is not a film that's easy to get. You can't get this on YouTube.
This was what I was thinking.
Yes,
earlier.
You can't get this on YouTube. You can't get this on archive.org. You can't find this any which aware.
Unless you're willing to put in a $200
deposit at Movie Madness. It is straight up out of print. This is a 1968 film called The Devil Rides Out. Also directed by Terrence Fisher, another Terrence Fisher directed film because he was big in the Hammer camp. This also features Christopher Lee as well as a number of other sort of no-name actors and actresses. But Christopher Lee is great in the film. He does not play. He does not play the devil. He does not play the lead Satanist. He plays just a kindly war hero who is protecting the integrity of one of his war buddies.
Okay.
So it's basically the story is Christopher Lee and one of his war buddies have taken an oath to protect one of the sons of their war buddies who has fallen afoul with Satanism. And the thing that's shocking about this, it is a very, very dark and very kind of realized depiction of Satanism. And there's multiple scenes in the film. I mean, the film starts with sort of this very kind of psychedelic, satanic, dreamlike sequence early on. But then, there's multiple scenes towards the end of the film that actually involve like a satanic black mass, up to and including Baphomet actually manifesting himself and appearing. So it's not just...
So you get an appearance of the devil.
You do get an appearance of the devil, and it's not just sort of like sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, kind of like Satanism is sort of fun. It's like, no, this is a serious deal.
It's not a rubber mask.
No, it is not a rubber mask. It is straight up Baphomet. And so Christopher Lee essentially spends the entire film both trying to learn more about Satanism and to protect his war buddy's son against the trappings of Satanism.
I bet you this was probably a pretty personal film for Christopher Lee because wasn't he a World War II veteran?
I think I believe he was right.
Yeah, and I know that he was sort of part of his in a way that's what he was fond of Tolkien and why he was so fond of that story. About his war. His time during the war. So,
although this film is set in, it's set in London in 1929, and again, it would
have been World War I.
Yeah, it would have been World War I. But as kind of as I was talking about earlier too, with regard to Witchfinder General, which I think was probably one of the films that really kind of like broke through the mold for Hammer in terms of getting away from.
Now, didn't bring
the studios?
I thought you were going to bring up Witchfinder General.
Well, I watched Witchfinder General. But I didn't think it was that great. I mean, it's like Witchfinder General is more. I mean, it's kind of like it's sort of like it's sort of like Hostel in a way. I mean, obviously the prevailing commonality there is sadism and torture, but you kind of go, is it really a horror film? It's not particularly scary as much as it is just kind of gross and disturbing. The sadism is pretty disturbing. And the other thing I didn't really care for with regard to Witchfinder General was that Vincent Price kind of plays. It's pretty plain. His acting is not. It's not Vincent Price of the 1950s. Vincent Price or the 1940s. It's pretty darn plain. I know it wasn't at the end of his career, but it was getting towards it was in the shadow of his career.
Right.
And it's just not that great of a film. But The Devil Rides Out is a really, really great film, and I do encourage folks, if they can,
to pirate it
somehow, some way. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were telling me that they obtained a copy of The Devil Rides Out, dubbed in English with Greek subtitles.
Okay, well,
no, sorry, it's in Greek with English subtitles, dubbed into Greek with English subtitles.
Oh man, that's kind of
that's a mass up.
Yeah, that is a mashup. Get on the Dan Hallstatt phone call to see if he can take that copy from
find a 35 millimeter print of The Devil Rides Out,
or even just do a projection of the
DVD copy,
the DVD on over at Hollywood.
That was my number one, The Devil Rides Out.
So my number one. It is one of the big slow burners.
Yeah.
And it has had this fabulous reputation. And about halfway through my movie, I was like, "Is it gonna become a horror movie here?"
Right.
But this one's like Audition.
Yeah.
Hang with it.
Yeah.
This is Roman Polanski's Repulsion.
Oh yeah, Repulsion's good.
Oh my God.
It's a great film.
This was and I think part of the problem with getting invested in this story is kind of like in Audition. The protagonist, you get a lot of story about the protagonist,
right?
But it's not a, it's
a super slow burn. It actually reminds me a lot too of Rosemary's Baby too, which again, super slow burn.
That's a Polanski movie.
Well, I know.
But Catherine Deneuve plays Carol, who is so neurotic in this thing. I think you start off and because she's so distant and she clearly has a sexual neuroses, a fear, a fear of male relationships,
right.
And she's skittery, and that initially it's like, well, does this make it a horror movie? And you do feel invested because she makes some really foolish decisions.
Right.
Or it's the beginning of her mental breakdown, and she's failing to do things that she should be doing, like paying the rent or letting the tub drain or throwing the food away.
Right.
Or, there's a lot of this stuff where it just, you're going, you shouldn't be left alone by yourself.
Right.
But at the same time, I was like, this isn't enough for a horror movie. And then she starts getting these rape, or she's just seeing men sort of popping up in the mirror.
Right.
One of the great mirror scares of all time.
Yeah.
Just comes out of nowhere. It's like, oh, geez, that's new. And then she goes from neurotic to psychotic, has some clearly schizophrenic breaks. The notions of how big the apartment gets changes. Polanski really jumbled that up. The people who she should be trusting and who should care about her are manipulative,
right?
And so they're not likable. Mm-hmm. And then she gets assaulted, and she fights back, and it becomes really bloody.
Yeah.
And really violent, and she goes, and it is one of those things where you're, it definitely goes full on horror movie, hands reaching out of walls.
Right.
And just that her mental breakdown, I think, I feel like really I want to go see Unsane now, just sort of as,
right,
you
as a comparator,
this is one of the best mental breakdown movies I've seen, and
Gotta see
I think
Insane.
that's this was one where clearly influenced by Godard.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole opening sequence with Catherine Deneuve keyed in on her eye, twitching and sort of shuffling back and forth. But the thing is that she does this like 10-mile stare for a good portion of the movie,
Right.
And totally disaffected. She's a disaster at work. She's a disaster with her sister. She is a hot mess, and but it's fascinating. Brilliant movie. If you can deal with slow burn horror,
Yep.
it's one to watch.
Absolutely.
It's a great movie, but it takes patience.
All right. So the latter half of the decade that was captured by color, Christopher Lee, Hammer, Amicus, Satanism, and nudity.
Yeah.
Let's go down our list again here really quickly. What do you got for number 4 on your fearsome?
My number 4 was Berserk with Joan Crawford, 1967.
My number 4 was Dracula, Prince of Darkness from 1966.
My number 3 was Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn.
All right. My number 3 was Hour of the Wolf, the Ingmar Bergman film from 1968.
That's free?
Yeah.
I'll have to track that down.
Yeah.
Not that free makes that much of a difference, but
No.
yeah. My number 2 is Dementia 13 by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Luana Anders and William Campbell.
My number 2 was The Green Slime from 1968.
I love that. And my number 1 is Repulsion with Catherine Deneuve, directed by Roman Polanski.
And my number 1 is The Devil Rides Out from 1968. Good luck finding it.
Yeah. I think it tells you that there's sophisticated and campy in equal measure available.
Oh, yeah.
And both, I think, are represented well throughout the decade. I think the 70s sees even more divergence with the break of the MPAA.
Well, you know what I think the 1960s really was? It was like trying stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the 1950s was the 1940s really, but the 1950s was all about formula.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything was very formulaic. The 1960s was like, let's try some different stuff out.
Yeah, well,
like try out some different shots, try out some different stories, try out some different angles, throw some nudity in, throw some blood in, throw some sadism in, see what sticks. And that's really what a lot of these films were about.
And I think that, I still think that Europe and Japan had a huge influence.
Oh,
and that's what helped. I think the erosion of the morality laws, the changing sociology of the world in the 60s, particularly in the late 60s, and that there's much the horror. I think Hollywood in general was hugely influenced by foreign films.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think you could say that a whole lot, except for the 1920s and 30s when it was France and Germany producing movies.
Right.
When Hollywood took over in the 1930s, it was game over for about 40 years.
Right.
So,
yeah, not until Italy and
30
Japan.
years, yeah.
Italy and Japan really came on strong.
Yeah.
Italy, Japan, and the UK.
Yeah. So if you were going to, let's benchmark the 1960s. What?
Well, I think you know what I think the benchmarks are the films we haven't talked about,
Right, because we all know about them.
Because we talked about in the top 100. I honestly think the benchmarks, the early benchmarks, Psycho, Peeping Tom, the latter benchmarks, Night of the Living Dead,
Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah. Boom, done.
Yeah, I don't think, and it's hard to argue that because they are so monumental. I think
they really are,
because all 4 of those movies are before these movies and after these movies.
Right, groundbreaking.
Yeah, because I think you could throw all the Hammer and the AIP stuff. It's like, well, this is a new take on the stuff that we got from the 1930s.
Right,
and even some of the schlocky stuff, or some of the noir, the ones that I brought up tonight are tied back to some of the noir films from the 40s and 50s.
Right.
But also heavily influenced by Psycho.
Yep.
And I didn't get to it, but I think there was Plague of the Zombies was one that I kind of was tempted to try and put out there.
Yep.
But I think that Night of the Living Dead changed the rule books for zombies.
Indeed.
And in the way that to do how you end a story. So, what have you got for grave digging?
Well, for grave digging, I wanted to mention a little film that we teased out on the scariestthings.com website, scariestthings.com. 1T. This, of course, is a film called Among the Shadows, which is going to be coming out in 2019, featuring Lindsay Lohan as
That's right.
as a werewolf.
Speaking of hot mess,
I put this in the, and I think I said this, I put this in the everybody's got to pay the bills category. Just like you and I need to pay the bills, Lindsay Lohan also needs to pay the bills. Hopefully she's on the mend and she's doing well for herself, but certainly Among the, I think it's called Among the Shadows. Yeah, Among the Shadows is definitely a step back from the remake of Herbie and the Love Bug. The thing that's funny is that apparently the film was originally titled The Shadow Within, but then they discovered that lo and behold, there was already a film from 2007 called The Shadow Within, and they were like, oh crap, we got to change the title. So that gives you some sense as to how
it's such a generic title.
How this film is being produced and who's behind the wheel. But yeah, I'm curious to see how Among the Shadows does for Ms. Lohan. What do you got for your grave digging for this week?
I want to direct folks to some of the side projects that our colleague Liz is doing.
Heck yeah.
She just did a book report for Carnivorous Lunar Activities, which is something that Fangoria Cinestate reached out to us and said, "Hey,
the book is, you can pre-order the book.
Yes.
It's not out in the bookstores yet, but you can pre-order it online. You can pre-order it on Amazon or at Powell's City of Books."
Yeah.
And you can get it there. But yeah, and so you can actually read Liz's review and you can listen to an interview with
Max Booth
the third.
Max Booth the third.
The third, yes. I couldn't remember if it was a third or a fourth.
So
that's a great little interview with Max.
And I kind of wanted to reach out and say thanks to Liz for actually making these connections. Stay tuned because we're going to get another author interview coming up.
That's right.
In a couple of weeks. I think she's made the recording. I think that there's going to be a special drop time in February that we're going to do that. But just sort of as a reminder to everybody that we're also in it for the books.
Yeah, that's right.
And then last reminder is another grave digging side note. Don't forget that we have Wiz World coming up on February the 22nd, 23rd. We're going to be live.
22nd, 23rd, 24th.
24th. We're going to have a booth on the 24th, so we're going to be there. We'd love to meet with you. All of our fans here in the Northwest.
Absolutely.
And we're going to have buttons and pins and maybe T-shirts, and we just love to see you and talk to you about.
And Jason Momoa, if you're listening, stop on by the booth.
Yeah,
and tell Eric to watch Carrie.
I think Jason Momoa could convince me to watch Carrie. There are some other. I think as our friend Max has been helping coordinate. The thing is, Wizard World is really amping up their horror game, and so we're hoping that we're going to get some really good horror.
And Scariest Things is at the forefront of that amping up,
leading the charge.
We are
the guinea pigs.
All right, I'm going to take us out with a tagline from a 1964 film, getting us back into the 1960s. This film is The Curse of the Living Corpse, and what I love about this tagline is it seems to go on forever. From out of the grave stalks the creature that undrapes.
What? Undrapes? As it takes the drapes down?
Yes, undrapes the passions of the living.
That's not what?